when Pokemon Go was played in major metropolitan areas, the suicide and self-harm went down 34 to 40% in direct correlation with playing the game. And then when the game stopped being played, the rates went straight back up. So we're not only targeting, strong economies with players and their self-harm, we're actually in the game targeting impoverished areas with another element that I can get into, an aspect of gameplay that we think could actually affect poverty at a permanent level.
Startups with Stu is a podcast for anyone living or wanting to live the startup life, either as a founder or a team member. Your host, Stuart Draper, was a 9-time Inc. 5000 honoree before age 40. This show dives deep into the exhilarating world of entrepreneurship with guests that are seeking advice from Stu for their startup or business owners that want to share their entrepreneurial journey. Listeners always walk away with actionable ideas of what to do to take their startup to the moon. Startup life can feel like a roller coaster ride. And with Startups with Stu, you're likely to turn your roller coaster ride into a rocket ship ride. Get ready to uncover the secrets to startup success from visionary founders and savvy investors who've transformed groundbreaking ideas into thriving ventures.
This episode is brought to you today by PodUp. PodUp.com is the leading all-in-one AI-powered podcasting software. If you've ever considered having a podcast, want to get started, go to podup.com and check it out. I produce my podcast, use a variety of tools and producers that help me get everything done that I'm doing. Podallies.com is the agency I choose. If you're interested in having a podcast, you don't want to do it yourself through podup.com, I highly recommend that you go check out podallies.com and schedule a strategy call with one of their production specialists. They will be able to help you and think through everything you need to before you get started on your journey as a podcaster. Welcome to another episode of Startups with Stu. I am so pleased to introduce you guys today to the founder of Gravity Jack. His name is Mr. Luke Richey. He is currently in the throes of raising funding. He's raised $550K of the $3.5 million he's looking to raise. And I'm looking to get to know Luke as well as we go here. A lot of my network ended up being my first guests. I'm now on episode 15 published. I'm probably on number 23 or 4 recorded. And it's fun to kind of be outside my network and to be introducing you guys to folks that I'm meeting for the first time. That's a huge benefit of a podcast. So if you're an aspiring podcaster, start with your network and watch how it can expand from there. Luke, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Stuart. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not plan on going here first because I'm so excited to hear your pitch on Gravity Jack. But first, let's talk wrestling. How did wrestling help you later in life and in your career so far?
I actually love to hire wrestlers too. So I won't go too deep into my philosophy because I would probably offend people. But the reality is when you're a wrestler, it's just you, so there's an independence factor and, cutting weight, there's just so much about it that requires a level of dedication. So I actually love it when I see wrestling on a resume. Like that's an automatic. I'm going to interview them for whatever position we're hiring for. But I was kind of a wild child, so I did get kicked out of wrestling twice for fighting. So, so then I went the MMA route, and that was a whole other thing. But I just
cool.
Yeah. So I just learned when this was starting, when I found out you were a wrestler, I'm like, oh, that's why I like them so much.
That's awesome. Yeah, wrestling shaped my life. I learned how to overcome nerves. I think people get afraid of butterflies, which is silly when you put it that way, right?
Yeah.
But butterflies are scary to a lot of people. They have big teeth and they're mean, right? But really, if I think about nerves are, and butterflies, that's your soul or your body telling your soul, yep, I understand the significance of this and I'm ready to go to war. Yeah. I can do this.
Yeah.
And
I'm alive too.
When you embrace, I'm alive, right? I'm ready. I feel. And I think you need to put yourself, especially as a founder, consistently in positions where you are nervous, sweating. You literally, if you're not getting a cold sore here and there, if you're someone that gets cold sores, you're not scaring yourself enough, putting yourself in a uncomfortable situation frequently enough. The growth zone is outside of the comfort zone. So, okay, Luke, I love that start for us regarding wrestling and your mentality there. I totally agree, and look to hire athletes when I can as well, because there's just so much that you can't teach that they've already been taught.
Yeah, it's a mental state.
Yeah. So, Luke, you've recently raised $550,000. You've got $3.5 million in total for this round of funding. Pitch us on Gravity Jack. Let's pretend that I've got myself and 4 other angels in the room, not sharks, interested. We like the idea of getting in the gaming industry. Tell me why we should invest in Gravity Jack.
Well, I mean, one, everybody knows the industry size is larger than music, movies, and sports combined. Actually, the gaming industry.
No way, is it really that big?
It's giant. It's giant. And it's only growing because every Gen A and Zer is a gamer. Gravity Jack, we're the oldest augmented reality company in the United States. We've got a patent portfolio that actually covers like fundamental aspects of augmented reality. There will be more news about that later on our intellectual property portfolio and how we're monetizing that.
Wow.
You know, the game Pokemon Go, Niantic came to us before they even actually had game mechanics done. We worked with them. They only brought the game mechanics we discussed to this certain spot, but then they also utilized our IP in the game. And in terms of team, one, we've kind of been guns for hire for the last 15 years, but we've been doing games for other companies. Pokemon Go aside, we've done what I call predatory gaming, where we didn't even realize what was happening, to the dopamine responses of users. We just couldn't believe how much money was being made. So we did an app called Double Down Casino that was doing 35 million a month. And,
whoa,
that's not where we're going with our gaming side. We're actually going non-predatory, but actually just as profitable. And then in terms of team, and I have some of the most amazing leadership surrounding me that is possible. I have the founder of all video games, the father of all video games, Nolan Bushnell. Everybody knows who Atari is. He's literally one of my mentors. And then our board and the rest of the leadership is comprised of kind of 3 categories: entertainment, gaming, which Nolan's a part of, and then philanthropy. Because one of the key aspects of our game is how it affects human flourishing. Just sharing with you a quick stat. When Pokemon Go was played in major metropolitan areas, suicide and self-harm went down 34 to 40% in direct correlation with playing the game. And then when the game stopped being played, the rates went straight back up. So we're not only targeting, strong economies with players and their self-harm, we're actually in the game targeting impoverished areas with another element that I can get into, an aspect of gameplay that we think could actually affect poverty at a permanent level.
So you mentioned that Gravity Jack's been around. When did you first start working on Gravity Jack?
In 2007, my wife and I, we do all of our companies together, after I met her. In 2007, we had a gaming technology that we'd written that was acquired by a gaming company. And then we were forced to work for them for 2 years. That's a whole nother, when you're a CEO your whole life and then you work for somebody, that's a different experience, but also humbling and learning. Yeah. In 2009, we were kind of ending that contract, and I was telling her about what's coming because the App Store had just been launched. iPhone 1 was out. Everybody's kind of talking about mobile as this thing. And I started telling her how dumb phones were, that 1, it's going to cause neck issues over time. And then 2, that augmented reality, where there would be a ubiquitous moment in time when people would put on a pair of glasses and ultimately contacts and experience the digital world in their real world. And she said, really? And so I just explained it to her. I'm like, this is what's going to happen. This just has to happen. The few people that knew about it at the time call it augmented reality because it was from a sci-fi book. And she said, let's patent it. So, she's from a line of like 30 attorneys. So she just got to work patenting it. And that was kind of the start of it.
So today, it's been now how many years since then? What was the time frame?
Yeah, 15 years. So
what will be the platform then for playing with Gravity Jack? Is it going on like Oculus?
when we started the company, we actually wrote our patents based on a game mechanic concept. Like we had these whole, like, how would we do this? If we wanted to overlay a character on a person, how would we do this? So we like, there was lots of location determined, like all of our patents were around a game mechanics. But then we kind of realized, hey, we have to wait for this certain period, like this certain moment in time when one, phones are ubiquitous that could actually support, the graphical requirements for this, which now it's 94% across the planet. And that's even in impoverished regions. And that's going to mark the moment where you're about to see glasses that will be in home first, and then something ubiquitous that you would wear to the mall, and not be a dork like me, because I would wear an Apple Vision Pro to the mall, but nobody else would. So that's because we wanted this game as transitions from these devices to the devices that you're ultimately going to wear on your head. And our game is both augmented reality, but it also has VR elements. So looking at like the Quest 3 that's coming out, that'll definitely be a platform we apply to, but primarily mobile, because there's a whole element that that's just what people are doing out and about. And our game is made for life in general as you're doing life. And hopefully the whole goal of the game is not to just do life indoors, but like let's get out and play.
It's similar to the Pokemon Go that you were describing earlier. Okay. So how did you network into Nolan Bushnell? Like that is a huge connection. And for those listening that are looking to raise money, like you're going to catch an angel investor by surprise when you tell them that like you have the pioneer of your industry on your board. So is he on your board or is he a team member, like working with you?
He's on our board, but he actually works directly with me. I could call him on his cell phone, which is still wild to me. Every time I call him, I'm like, I can't believe I'm talking to Nolan Bushnell.
The dude that helped build Atari is on your team. That's so cool. Yeah, that will definitely help with catching attention as you're raising money. And then it will become a side note, positive thing when you get closer to getting the check written and other things become more important over time. But so how'd you network into him?
That's a really great question. So first off, I identified who I wanted on my board. I wrote out a list of 6 names. And just to back up, only one of those I didn't get. And that was for some other reasons. And then I was just relentless. I was relentless about, like, I would go on their LinkedIn and see who they're connected to. And I'm like, and I actually connected with them on a human level. I'm like, look, I'm doing a game, but there is this element that we're actually targeting that actually could impact humanity, permanently, systemically, generationally. And would you like to be a part? And if so, I really need your mentorship and help. And then they wouldn't respond. So then I'd find somebody that knew him, or I found somebody that could text him. Nolan specifically took me a long time. I actually had people like were showing up. I knew he'd be in an angel group like in LA. And I have a friend that, ran robotics at Tesla that was going to it. And so it's like this constant, he just kept hearing about it. So finally he answered me and I got time with him, and he was like, he goes, this is a game changer. And to have him say that when I explained all the mechanics, it was like, wow, okay. It validated it for me too, also, because you kind of like, am I just crazy with all the ways we're going to change gaming and these components? But
he was able to catch a vision for what Atari could become at a time when the idea of video games was like, who does that? Who's going to buy that kind of thing, right? So
I was talking to it once. I was down in San Francisco at the Computer Museum, and I was talking to him, and I'm just walking through talking to him. And then I walked past a whole exhibit about him. And I said, no way, this is like surreal. But yeah, like he's still alive, but he's in because stuff happens so fast that he's a part of history.
That's for sure. He is. So how are you working with the board? Have they invested? Have any of the board members invested?
Partially. And then Nolan couldn't, because he's also raising, like, the guy is unstoppable on all of his startups. Like, he's got this one, works in the same lab he's worked in since he started Atari. And it's super cool. Like, but he's got old stuff like oscilloscope stuff you don't even need anymore, but it's just rad. So partially, and he specifically couldn't, and he told me that up front. He's like, hey, this isn't going to be a possibility for me at this time, but I will help, and I'll be there. I'll help with storyline, those sort of things. Yeah.
Okay. So what's in it for me as an investor? Like, you're raising 3.5 million, you're pre-revenue at what valuation?
due to the patent portfolio, we're 23.4. So it would seem like a high valuation, but we actually have both existing revenue from our agency, existing revenue from our licensing, and I thought about spinning this off into a different, just kind of like a wholly owned subsidiary. And I'm not opposed to that, but I also feel like, hey, if let's just say, you want some risk aversion, the patents and the other components actually provide a little bit of a buffer. Plus, I'm all in on everything I do. And, even just different entities feel like something different to me. So I just like to focus.
Okay, cool. So what are the revenues today?
On the agency side, we typically range on the 2 million to 4 million. And that's actually intentional. I've never tried to grow that. It's never been the business model we wanted to land on. It's always been, let's support R&D, and wait for the moment when we're going to do the game. When I met with the Apple guys, it was about a year and a half before the AVP was launched, and they were telling me some top secret stuff, and they're like, no, it's coming, and it's going to have full field of view, a high resolution. I was like, okay, this is the moment that we've literally been waiting for. Because then we transition into the rest of the gameplay. And
that is so interesting, Luke, because I like it and I hate it at the same time. Let me tell you why, from an investor perspective, why I like it and hate it. I'm an investor in PodUp, the podcast software that we are recording this episode with today.
Oh, nice.
And the software is actually really impressive. Like, I'm a user. I like using it. It works well to record and edit, but there's so many elements to it. And I feel like the time has come. The market's ready, but there's this hesitation to really go after the market yet, because they are currently running an agency called Pod Allies, where they do podcast production services, and it becomes a distraction from actually going after the software. On the other hand, I love it because it means you have a way to always cash flow. You yourself, you're not in a position to make dumb decisions because money's tight. You've got a form of income that's coming in, and that's healthy. But it's almost like it's a separate business, and the valuation you'll get on that revenue is not great when you go to sell that business by itself, right? Because service-based businesses just don't get the multiples that software and gaming businesses get. Gosh, I bet gaming businesses on multiples beat SaaS businesses, and probably by a good margin. Is that true?
It's huge. Well, real quick,
what are the typical multiples? Teach me.
Oh man. Well, on the patent revenue, with relation to our valuation, 3 of our patents are litigation grade, meaning we actually have a law firm actively pursuing some of the bigger players. And that's actually in process. And I mean, ultimately that could even be my entire funding and a lot more. And then the rest of our patents are licensing grade. I would say we've been actually very careful about how we're approaching that, because we didn't want to set a ceiling on, some of the licensing for our patents. So that's kind of where that's at. It's kind of in this box of unknown, but really cool.
So you basically have 3 forms of revenue that you're going after here. You've got your agency. Is that a software development agency? Is that mostly what it does?
Yeah, and primarily we focus on computer vision and augmented reality problems that nobody else can solve. We've done it for Department of Defense, Boeing, just really cool stuff, but that also drives our IP portfolio. So some of the new patents, but I do intend to kind of kill agency, because it just takes effort.
Kill or sell, right? There's no reason. And when you kill, it's not killing the jobs, it's killing
I pull them into the gaming side.
Chips of continuing to service versus going all in on the gaming revenue that you can get someday. I love that. So tell me that on the gaming revenue side and the multiples there, I got to believe that can go bonkers, right?
Oh, well, and there's 2 ways to do it. So in the Double Down application that we did, Double Down Casino, I don't, not slamming them, but in my mind, I call it predatory, because what we're doing is just exchanging dopamine for, and not even dollars. Entertainment. It's just straight dopamine for dollars. And that is when we handed it off to the customer at 6 months with all of the mechanics, we've done everything. It was doing 35 million a month. It's still does close to that. Like it's never actually just stopped just generating revenue. From a per player perspective, I'm going to kind of round a little bit, but you've between Gen A, Z, and X, you've got about $80 a month, and that averages out the low spenders and kind of some of the whales in the United States. And that pretty much stays true across the whole planet in a strong economy. Japan, Korea, Europe's a little lower, but then Saudi Arabia is this whole other animal of whales.
Wow.
So it's now, and that's kind of averaged across all games. If a user is being, some of the more hyper addictive personalities, are spending $250 a month. And now gaming studios, to a degree, are really just going after that dopamine for dollars. And the problem is they start to hate it, actually. So they have like a 3 to 6 months max life cycle of playing the game, and then they're actually angry about it. And then they just move on to the next 3 to 6 month cycle. But then you've got games like World of Warcraft, who are crafting story, listening to the users, and monetizing them over a course of time, where that user becomes worth way more, because they're still going to spend that $80 a month, but they're going to do it for the next 10 years because you're actually exchanging entertainment for dollars. And that, with Gen A and Z, it's actually wild, because X is one thing, but Gen A and Z, they are gamers. 94% of them, the same number it's actually 90 to 94. If you were to ask them who they are, they'll say, I'm a gamer. Actually, that's the first thing they identify as. That's not a teenager, I'm a New Yorker, no, I'm a gamer. And this is the games I played. And so it's the potential for monetizing them in a non-predatory way, because they're not going to movies. They're not spending their money on these other things. If you exchange true entertainment with them for dollars, then you actually end up with a lot more potential. I know that's a long-winded answer, but it's an exciting question, because the market's gigantic. Like, it's so big.
Yes, it is. So massive. Like, when you said that it's bigger than the video industry, I'm like,
sports, music, movies
combined. Come on, no way. I just can't even fathom that.
And the curve
so much
is
money.
Even the curve is projected to be higher. Like it's just going to keep exiting. Yeah, it's fascinating.
There's revenue that comes from the agency. The revenue that comes from the litigation opportunity is unknown still today, or are you already collecting on the patents?
I kind of know what likely some of the settlements are going to be, but I can't share that. And it's significant, but it's still years down the road. I mean, in a worst case scenario, and in a really good case scenario, a year.
And you're saying that one thing could really make that valuation of 23.4 million look small, huh?
And that valuation was actually from a valuation we did in 2018, before we even had litigation grade on our patents. So before we'd taken them through the process of really, hey, are these, because there's investors that will just invest in the litigation for the patent pursuit of infringement. Oh,
got it.
Yeah. So,
okay. So on one hand, you're like, hey, I'm going to go be the good guy. I'm not changing dopamine for dollars, and that's it. Like, I got more. I'm adding value to the world. Tell us about how Gravity Jack will do that. Because for me, I care about that. I care about what the investments I make are doing in the world.
So it's multi-pronged. I'm going to talk about like the first prong and then the secondary prong. Like, there's 7,164 languages on the planet. And this is going to sound like it's very disparate, but it's not. 7,000 of those languages are not targeted by any form of AI automation or automated translation. And if you look at the people that speak those 7,000 languages natively, they also speak one of the other 146 that are targeted. But they're receiving everything in a second language. They're receiving their education, they're receiving marketing, all of it in their second language, which actually has an effect. Those same people, 4.2 billion people that speak those 7,000 languages natively, are also the ones in poverty to severe poverty. So there is actually.
By the way, I experienced this. Just a quick side note. I experienced this. This summer, my wife and kids, we went to Chiapas, Mexico, and visited these small villages in the mountains and helped finish the school there. And in the process of doing that, we learned that there's like 1 million people in the state of Chiapas, Mexico, that speak different dialects. And I speak Spanish. I lived in Argentina for 2 years, and they don't speak Spanish. Like they had a really hard time communicating. I had a really hard time communicating with them. They had a hard time communicating with me, and it does impact their ability to have upward mobility in society.
And there's never been a marketing message from anybody, like even the biggest, Coca-Cola, from a marketing perspective, that has been in every single language. You can't do it. Like, it's actually not possible in the subdialects. Now, if you have a game that's distributed across the world, you could, with the mechanisms I'm about to describe, which is, in our game, questing is this huge part. And you're fighting this evil AI. Everybody's playing together. There's no player versus player. Like, everybody's on the same team, which is, mirrors what should, be here now.
Yeah.
And in that gameplay, you save these creatures from the evil AI that are coming through the portal, and you don't kill them. You actually disassemble how the AI has assembled them, and you save their souls, and they become your companions and friends. And these friends are also little AIs that we've created. So, and this mechanic we've actually tested. It's so fun. You save these creatures, but they can actually now speak one of the languages you speak, and they talk to you. So you're like, and you use them in the missions, you use them away from keyboard, they use them to guard territory. So it's like, you have to collect companions. Like, you have to have these friends. This is a major core game loop. And if you're in a targeted region where we're targeting one of the unreached languages, and when I say unreached, specifically the qualifier is no translation, then that creature who might speak in Mali, Africa, you speak French, you speak Mali, your creature is going to speak to you in French, but it loves you, and it's going to actually ask you, hey, how would I say tree in Mali? How would I do this? Like, how do I say run in Mali? And so you actually teach this creature, and you receive in-game currencies. You actually get paid in the in-game currency to do this. So not only are we bringing a capability to actually create an AI, a large language model for that people group, we're also providing them income. And this is not an untested model. A group called SIL International tested this, but it was really, really expensive to create an LLM group for a people, even when you're only paying them $40 to $80 a month for translation, which, by the way, doubles their whole income for a couple hours of work a night. But it actually worked. So in the 4 places they did this, people were now all of a sudden learning. Now they're all of a sudden they're getting education, and it's like a proven model to, one, bring some opportunity to people groups, but also then it's a permanent fix to the systemic generational poverty, because now they start starting businesses and they're consuming everything in their native tongue. Yeah. So the gameplay itself is actually, you just teach this creature. It's fluid. And it's also what's called multimodal capture. So we're not just grabbing what they're writing, because 3,000 of those languages, actually 2,800, don't have any form of written language. We're also capturing the lip movement, the facial structure, the gestures, if there are some, because actually some, you have to have a gesture with a sound. And we're capturing that. And we have domain specific AIs that we're working on with SIL, who is a partner of ours, to ultimately create this mechanism where we can feed all this kind of common data in, and we receive a large language model back. The long-term investment we're doing is into these people groups, because what you end up doing with these people groups that are in poverty is you bring them out of poverty. The whole wealth pyramid grows. Everybody actually starts making more money, including the people at the top. So it's like, there's no real person that can complain about this. If you bring people out of poverty, everybody does better. There's a big sense we're essentially extracting from players in strong economies, taking a portion of that, paying it out to create large language models, and then over the long term, SIL owns the nonprofit rights to speak to that people group, but we own the commercial rights. So I have to ask, like I asked some angels, what do you think it's worth to have a monopoly on speaking to 4.2 billion people in their native tongue? I actually don't even know that number. I actually have tried to calculate it. I've tried to calculate licensing deals. Like, we'll be able to talk to people that have never been spoken to before with just all via game mechanics and, assuming some variables like distribution.
Okay. Taking a quick break from the episode. Sorry to interrupt, but I have to take a second and thank the great team at Pod Allies that helps me produce this podcast. Startups with Stu is not an easy undertaking. It takes a lot of work and team power to get this thing done. So the team I use for my podcast, podallies.com, go check them out. If you are considering a podcast, if you've thought you have a dream for a show and you want to go make it happen, go to podallies.com and book a strategy call today. I promise you won't regret it. Speaking of the show or shows, let's get back to Startups with Stu in this episode. Forgive my interruption, but if you're interested, go check out podallies.com.
So I got to believe that of the 4.2 billion people that you say we don't speak to, 3.9 billion of them actually do a pretty good job of getting around with the second language.
Yeah.
There is like maybe a 0.3 billion, so 300 million people, right, that are in a position of, I actually don't speak one of the 146 at all. Like I'm not even in the game.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Most of them are in the game at some level, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, you just stated a fact. The majority of them also speak one of the 146. What's interesting is when you start looking at numbers of what that actually means, though. If you were to educate somebody in their native tongue versus, and this is just stuff you can look up, and I don't have the studies, like the links memorized, but if you were to educate somebody in their native tongue or their secondary tongue, 74% higher retention in their native tongue. This is also interesting. There's like consumer studies. If you pitch something to somebody in their native tongue versus, their second language, 74% higher likelihood to purchase from. And here's what's really crazy.
That resonates with me. Like, I agree with that for sure.
Yeah. And Christian organizations have done the same study, missionaries. Yep. It's also the same number. It's 74% higher conversion rate when they read the word of God in their native tongue. So it's like, okay, there's something there to that. So it's worth it to Coke for us to be able to say, Coke, do you want, Coke is it in 7,164 languages, 7,000, which have never been, read that statement. And the answer will be yes. What the value is interesting.
What's interesting is I think that there's two factors with these people. One, they live in very remote places. And by the way, where I was in Mexico and they speak Celtal, not Spanish, they did still have Coca-Cola. Like they had it, right?
Yeah.
But Coca-Cola can't connect with them the same way, at the same level. That part's, I think, unique. And then, but I think in general, these people are also in really remote places, right? Like across the world, people that are speaking these dialects are in remote places where they're not as connected to the global economy. They have a few things from the global economy that they have to have. And now, like they have the internet, they have Coca-Cola,
cell phones,
cell phones, but that's about it. Beyond those basic things that the world just has now, like they don't need the big grocery chain. They get by without it. They don't need a lot of things. They're okay. It's interesting. So, but that's one of many things that you can do to add value. Does this game then, Gravity Jack, have a place with first world country gamers as well?
That's such a great question. I didn't actually cover the secondary part. So one, the whole model revolves around the premise that we create something really fun that players want to play in strong economies. And then our whole kind of ethos at Gravity Jack is that we're also doing something that parents would want their kids playing. I have grandkids now, and I'm like, I want to make a game that I'm totally comfortable with my grandson playing. And I know that he won't be getting ripped off and, taken advantage of. But also, again, back to that Pokemon Go study, what they found was it was because kids got outside and they got connected to each other, which is kind of this natural way you and I grew up. But it's actually not that way anymore, especially in America, which is causing suicide rates through the roof, depression, isolation concerns. And so one, we get them outside, and then why did it drop, or why did it go back up when they stopped playing Pokemon Go? It's because they actually didn't form true connection. They actually didn't form true partnerships. In fact, the number one complaint for Pokemon Go was that you got us all to a place and then you didn't harness us. You didn't help us meet each other. So our game mechanics are actually driven around How do we create player engagement in a safe way? And then how do we give those players a voice in what that real world portion of the mission is? So you might arrive at a park and you might kill this digital monster together, which we have some amazing, really cool capabilities from our intellectual property to do things you have never done before. But you also have to do a real world task. So, and to gain the full, prize and loot. And that real world task is either surfaced from you, the users, or it's surfaced from a sponsor, like could be a hospital or whatever, or it could even be a government. And it could be from the kids where they say, hey, this park's dirty or it's got graffiti everywhere. We're going to clean it up. And so one of the business sponsors might work together with them. So they're actually doing something for each other and the community in some capacity. And there's like a whole kind of mission outlay and questing model we built of all what we expect will be some of the kind of those initial missions, but they do something and they do it together. And then they actually now have met somebody and actually formed true connection. And that, I believe, and I actually can't wait to do this study, is going to keep those suicide and self-harm rates down because you'll have true friendships.
I love it. I think the real connection, people are always shaming you for being on your phone. Why are you on your phone? You need to be present. It's like, well, you're present with whoever you're with, whether it be digitally or in person. You're present somewhere. And maybe you're supposed to be present digitally for this moment in time, not with the other people in the room that are already engaged in other things. But philosophically, the idea that we're helping people connect so they're actually having real human interactions, again, is powerful and important. So I appreciate you for doing that. Applaud you for doing that and seeing that. I can tell you're very motivated to just be someone that's trying to do what's right for the world in general. I saw on your sleeve, you've got the tattoo of the cross, and on the other side, you've got a cool message. So tell me about the tats and the significance. The curiosity's killing me.
Well, so I've always believed in God, but I didn't really follow, but I didn't have a relationship with him. In fact, the scripture that's on my arm is he prepares my hands for war. And I just thought that's a really cool verse for when I punch somebody in the cage, when I'm fighting. I'm like, this hand is like a war hand. And totally, I was young, and I actually still love combat. It's just fun. But
so awesome.
I had some events occur in 2019 that just where I actually had an encounter with Jesus, and it changed me. And I woke up different. I woke up actually, I know what being born again means. It was so wild that my family actually thought maybe I'd gone crazy. Because I'm like, no, well, if this is what crazy looks like, if it means that I all of a sudden have a love for people that I don't even know, and it means the narcissism and manipulation, all the things that I was just dropped away. Wouldn't you want to be crazy too? Like, and what ended up happening is actually they're like, yeah. And so my whole family came to know Christ, including my kids who were teenagers. And it just kind of spiraled. And then I actually thought, well, why God did you give me this encounter? You don't do that for everybody. And I realized he's always been in everything I've been doing. Like, I thought I was really smart for some of the patents I wrote, but it was like, no, he's been there. He's been in every single move I made. And I just really believe we have to go into gaming. We have to be where the kids are at. And, you'll hear people talk about how we're losing kids to this and we're losing kids to this. And I hate it when they play games, but it's like, it doesn't matter. They're still going to do it. They're still doing it. If you want to reach a kid, play a game with them for 1 minute. Not like any kid you meet, he'll be like, who, dude, Stu. Like, for every time you meet him, he'll be like, Stu. Like you form an instant connection with them. And that's why my heart is like, I'm like, what else could I do except try to use the tools and talents that I have to progress love, through the world. And that's where it starts. So cool. Yeah. You don't have to tell everybody about Jesus, but you just love on them. Love on these kids. And
last night I was walking out of the high school. I'd been at wrestling practice. Then I stayed a little longer for my nephew's basketball game. And as I'm walking out the foyer area, I hear this kid say, "Hey bro, are you going to come and get online and carry me on Fortnite tonight?
Yeah.
And I'm going, the vernacular of, oh, he's carrying me, like he's there for me. He's going to help me. And so I'm having this in-person connection with my friend, and I'm telling him I need his help tonight, and he's going to be there for me tonight, and we're going to do this thing together. Like
Exactly.
all of a sudden I had a little bit of a shift of mindset around gaming and the evils and good of it all. My kids have found the connection a little bit through it. They're not major gamers by any means, but they do play a little bit. And it's mostly because that's where their friends are and they want to be with their friends more than that's actually what they enjoy the most. But you also mentioned that you're creating a game where there's AI, evil AI out there, and there's everyone working together to go and overcome it.
Yeah.
Like obviously the biblical ties to that are really neat. And
Totally.
I love the idea of any story where good overcomes evil, but when it relates to the greatest evil of all and overcoming it and helping people catch the vision of that's what we're all as a human race trying to do here is really neat. So thank you for that. That's cool.
I love
Really
the mechanics too. Like your primary game energy source is in your primary place where you live. So your home is the first spot where light comes. You consume the light from your omni energy source, and that's what gives you the energy to go do the battles. And so we've actually written mechanics that are even for like the mom and dad, where you won't play the game likely, but you might be like you could harvest the omni energy source. You might have the game on your phone because your kids are at the park, fighting the monster, like, Dad, we need more energy. Can you harvest it real quick? Because they're not there. So you could actually do that and then share it out. So there's mechanics where we're trying to actually involve the whole kind of simple ways to connect even families together, with the home being kind of that main center.
So I love that. I think you're on something pretty cool here. So let's say that I can get them on board early Angel. It's pre-revenue. I don't think there's a product I can actually go play today, right?
No, nope, not yet.
But the engineers that you worked with have already built a product that did 35 million a month in sales, the casino business. So you've kind of been there and done that. They've been there and done that. That gives me some confidence in the investment, right? With $3.5 million, how long will that last you? And at the end of it, will I be able to see a Fortnite grade graphics style, like of level of quality business? Like, will a game that I can then show my kids and say, okay, Dad invested in this and this is where it is now?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Timeline wise, it will be where, like, when I'm fully funded, like if I could just hit the ground running, and I'm really good at running, we're great at running skunkworks teams. Like, you're doing this piece of the architecture, you're doing this piece, we're mastered it. Literally, it's all I've done my whole life. So, if I was fully funded today, I would be 12 months from the minimum viable product, which I call proof of life, meaning we've done all the play tests, we've got videos of people playing, and all of the key core game loops and components work, essentially launchable as a beta. And then we need marketing money. So that'll be the kind of the second phase. Did I cover all this?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So for Angels, you can give money to a founder and they can go work with your money right away. But of the 550 grand that you say you've raised so far, Luke, are you already putting that to work, or is it commitments and you're waiting until the full 3.5 is raised to go to work?
I literally work on it every spare moment. And from the agency side, so one, we have consumed and used and brought the game to a certain state of all that money to date. So there actually is a significant amount of progress. Even some of the game mechanics we've actually been able to run play tests on and tests. All of our game loops are done, which is probably one of the most difficult pieces, because you have to know, here's how everything ties together and what makes it fun. And then we do design it. One of the reasons the cost is lower than a AAA game, even though we can have AAA quality, is it's AR. So you actually have less 3D content. And we've been working deeply with generative AI in the 3D space, so that some of this is actually going to be able to happen dynamically, even on device. So we wouldn't have to download these huge 3D packages. So there's a lot we're doing that's very modern in terms of a gameplay mechanism, but also AR kind of lowers the barrier of having to have a $20 million 3D budget, because the characters are defined. You're using the real world as your play space. And then the VR environments, we're actually using, I call it generative destructive AI, because when you look into the old world, we actually destroy what you're actually looking at using AI. But again, we're using
AR,
yeah.
Just to be clear for listeners, with AR, you're holding up your phone's camera basically, and then able to see things in the world that are only on screen,
Correct.
Not actually in the park that you're visiting, right? As an example. And with VR, you're wearing a headset and you're looking inside a simulated world where all the graphics come from computer generated graphics instead of real world graphics, basically. Is that right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, totally. Nailed it.
It's wise for angels to find out what the burn rate is. We don't need to talk about that here on live on the podcast, but there's the burn rate's interesting in yours because you're spending it through the agency as well, right? So it's all married into one thing, as I understand it. But sometimes it's wise to commit that you will be a check written when the rest of the money is ready to be collected as well. And that way the money all gets put to work when you know there's enough money to actually go do something significant. Because if you raise 550, but you have a really hard time raising the other 3 million that you're raising, dude, all of a sudden 550 doesn't get you very far, and you have a half-baked product, and the few investors that did come in go, oh crap, how do we get the rest of the money you need? And, on one hand, it's good because those angels will probably go help you. They'll network with you, get you more meetings with potential investors. But on the other hand, for those guys, they're in a tight spot because if they don't get other people to take the bet with them, they've paid for something that's never going to hit the finish line, right?
Yeah, you're nailing it. I mean, I've been multiple times had to go through multiple fundraisers, not even just for Gravity Check, for prior companies. And I actually love that data. Okay, because then you can also use that data of, hey, we're going to cash your check here. That's also, you can use that as the FOMO response to actually get people to move quicker too, especially with, some angels and VCs. Some also just move really quick too. So
talk to me about your decision. And this will probably be our last fun question of the day before we got to wrap up this sweet episode here. Luke, why not bootstrap with your existing agency and keep more ownership for yourself?
So, because I just don't
too late now to change that because you've already taken some money.
Yeah,
right? There's already
also,
given.
And it's also it's not fast enough. I mean, we essentially did bootstrap the whole time. I raised a pre-seed in 2009. That funded the patents, and mostly it was just my family. With another trusted associates. Frankly, like agency is like, it's never been my full focus. And to really grow agency requires also investment. So if I want to grow agency past that 2 to 4 million year mark, I got to do some really things. And you actually have to productize. Like I actually interviewed 30 other agency CEOs, and they were telling me, we didn't break the 5 million barrier till we productized. And my interest was never in productizing some SaaS product. My interest has always been in the mission, and with the addition of some human flourishing elements in 2019. So that's why. And the reality is, money is important. I love that my family can do things, and it's never, even before Jesus, been my motivation. Like it's just this interesting byproduct, and it's really fun to make when you're like, oh, if you do that happens. And I think that's the answer.
Yeah, no, that helps. I mean, every situation's unique for every entrepreneur that's raising, and I like your point about moving faster. I think if you're considering raising money, that should be a key reason. You're ready to move faster. You realize that your opportunity may come and go if you don't raise fast enough. By the way, in the gaming world, like I think just like movies, there's always going to be a new movie coming out and new excitement around a new movie. So it doesn't mean that there can't be a new game that gets new excitement down the road, no matter where the technologies come and go. but still, I like the thought. So keep up the good work. This is awesome. Keep telling your story and keep doing good in the world while being a capitalist. I think people underestimate the power of what we can do when we work hard on a vision that's bigger than just the money that's going to come from it all. So.
Yeah, I really genuinely believe that. And I also just know, like, also to the last question, that, man, if it's the reason I want to move fast is, I was kind of pondering that as you were talking. It's like, there's kids literally killing themselves. There's people literally that have no way to feed their families, and, you know, some of these economically challenged spaces. What if we just do one people group? What if I just save 10 kids, but still make, you know, money? It's like, for me, it's just like, man, it's just one, or, you know, one people group or one kid. So that's kind of my motivation. I'm like, I got to move quick, because it's just getting worse. There's a pandemic of death, you know, especially in America, for suicide and self-harm. And I'm like, yeah, we could change that. So speed is important.
That's cool. I like that thought. I forgot one other question that I know our listeners think about. Where do you get the talent to help you from an engineering perspective? Are you overseas? If so, where are you getting that overseas help? What are you doing for that?
That's a really good question. We've been around a long time. When we were in 2009, when we were doing AR, all I had to do was go to a college, and I would get the best of the best of the best, because they were so interested in this concept of what could come and working on a future product. A lot of those guys stayed with me for, you know, over a decade. And I would just hire, and I always do this. I never even look for like what stack they code in. I look at literally how intelligent are they. Like, I remember our first director of development was a computational astrophysicist, but hadn't really coded. And I'm like, yeah, I can teach you to code. Like, that's the easy piece for a mind like yours. But then you start bringing physicists and mathematicians and, you know, computational astrophysicists together. Really just cool things get developed from these different perspectives and then good coding practices, because you want some of those too. My main methodology has been colleges that I pull really smart talent out of. And then just when I meet somebody, I'm always cataloging them for some future possible need. And I literally catalog them, like, this guy would be this. Like, if I ever need this type of capability, he's the guy I'm going to go get. And then if they all have a vision that they can believe in, that's why the guys even stay in agency. They're like doing stuff they don't necessarily believe in when they do this huge marketing campaign, but they have a vision of what we're going to do.
Pay attention to this. J.R. Simplot, the founder of a multi-billion-dollar company called Simplot, said, I can hire more PhDs in a day than I could earn in a lifetime. And Luke's done a good job of finding people that are smarter than him. That's what good entrepreneurs do. They get people around them that can actually do more for them than they could do for themselves. And they don't have the same business mindset, the same risk appetite, but they can come in and really make a difference with you and be a part of it. And you need to treat them right. You need to help them earn well when you earn well. And if you do that, you will win at business. So you're by Gonzaga. You're at Liberty Lake in Washington State, over by Spokane. Is that the main university you've pulled from, or where have you been able to find your talent?
It's oscillated. I feel like a university kind of reaches this technology trend where they've got poor equipment and poor training, and then they flip and invest a bunch of money. So really, it's been Eastern Washington University, Gonzaga, every single university at WSU. Back really quick, J.R. Simplot was literally one of my fundamental guys that I followed. I read an article about him in Fortune when I was 13 of him buying a potato field. And I was like, oh, I don't have to be poor. Like, that was actually where I realized, like, I was like, he just mentioned J.R. Simplot. Nobody mentions J.R. Simplot.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. I don't know that many stories. Haven't studied him as much as I have many other founders, but yeah, that's a cool quote from him that I really like.
I love it. Yeah. I keep segueing you. Sorry, Stuart.
No, you're good. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think there's a lot of lessons that you can learn as you present to angels, as you present to investors. If you bring up that you know how to build team, that you've been there and done that, or that you've got people around you that have been there and done that, it's going to help you raise money a lot faster than if you're just like, hey, I have an idea and I've never done it before and I don't have anyone around me that's done it before. It's just good luck at that point, right? It's not, you're going to have a hard time. So, thank you so much, Luke. Appreciate you being with me today.
Thank you.
Live right, work. Yeah. If you live right, you work hard and jump on the right opportunity when the timing is right, you're going to take your startup to the moon. And that's what we do with Startups with Stu. We'll help you take your startup to the moon. Keep listening in and make sure to go like, subscribe, follow, share, all that good stuff. And that's a wrap.
Hey, founders, entrepreneurs, investors, and other listeners of Startups with Stu. Thank you for listening to this episode today. As I mentioned at the beginning, as I mentioned in the middle, I want to take a second again at the end and say, if you haven't yet and you're considering a podcast, go check out podallies.com. They sure help me a lot with the show. And I am so grateful for all that they do to help me accomplish Startups with Stu and get it out to the world so we can help more founders and take your startup to the moon. Go check out podallies.com and podup.com if you're interested in podcasting at any level.
Thanks for joining me on Startups with Stu. We have big goals to help millions of entrepreneurs. If you enjoyed this show, please take a minute to share it with someone else that needs to hear it, or leave a review. Remember, success is within reach for those who dare to dream big and take action. Until next time, keep pushing forward on your entrepreneurial journey.